day, 5th grader, and welcome back to our science class. And for this lesson, we will be having our unit test. And I want you to prepare with you your pen and your notebook. I want you to choose the letter of the correct answer on your notebook. If you're ready, we will be having 10 questions for this unit test, and it's all about the flowering plants. Okay, for number 1, when does the flower fertilization occur? When does the flower fertilization occur? When do you think? If this is the flower, so if this is the pollen grain and it will stick to the stigma and then pass through the style, and this part, try to imagine that the flower first is it has to be pollinated, and then after that fertilization will occur. So in this part, so letter A, when the petals wither, when the petals wither, when the ovule becomes a fruit, when the ovule becomes a fruit, when the pollen reaches the ovule in the ovary, when the pollen reaches the ovule in the ovary, when the pollen falling on the top of a pistil, when the pollen falling on the top of the pistil. So which or when does the flower fertilization occur? After pollination, fertilization will go next. So let's move on to number 2. So let's move on to number 2. Which elements of the flower will grow up as a seed? Or which part of a flower will grow up as a seed? Okay, by looking at this illustration or picture, you can identify. Letter A, ovary. Letter A, ovary. Letter B, ovule. B, ovule. Letter C, style. Letter C, style. Letter D, stigma. D, stigma. Okay, this is the part of the ovary. So here you go. If we will remove the flower, so it will go like this. So which element of a flower will grow up into seed? Okay, let's move on to number 3. Which part of a plant does the flesh of the fruit we eat belong to? Which part of the plant does the flesh of fruit we eat belong to? So in the last slides was asked the forms into seeds, but for this is what part of a plant becomes a fruit, okay, or the flesh, the fruit that we eat belong to, okay, which part of the flower? Is it the ovule, letter A, ovule, B, ovary, B, ovary, C, stigma, C, stigma, D, top stamen, top stamen. You may now write your answer on your notebook. Okay, let's have the number 4. If you want to propagate a lot of orchids for selling, which method of propagation should you choose? If you want to propagate a lot of orchids for selling, which methods of propagation should you choose? So what kind of propagation is this? So this one is we use technology. Okay, for letter A, we have layering, layering. B, anarchy, B, anarchy. C, seedling, C, seedling. D, tissue culture, D, tissue culture. If you can still remember this picture, then you can answer this question. Okay, now write your answer. Let's move on to number 5. Which of the following is production of a male gametophyte? Which of the following is the production of gametophyte? So this one is an example of gametophyte process or production. So letter A, sperm cell. B, egg cell. Letter C, sepals. Letter D, seeds. Which of the following is the production of a male gametophyte? Letter A, sperm cells. Letter B, egg cells. Letter C, sepals. Letter D, seeds. Alright, so again, if you know what is male, then you can answer this number 5. Okay, we have male gametophyte. So what is the answer for number 5? Let's move on to number 6. What is the transfer of pollen from stamen to the pistil coat? What is the transfer of the pollen from stamen to the pistil coat? So it can be cross or it can be self. Alright? So fertilization, letter A, fertilization. B, genetic modification. Genetic modification. Letter C, pollination. Letter C, pollination. Letter D, germination. What do you call the transfer of pollen from stamen to pistil coat? So is it fertilization for letter A, B, genetic modification, letter C, pollination, and letter D, germination? You now write your answer on your paper. And let's move on to number 7. Which part of the flower is the male reproductive part? Which part of a flower is the male reproductive part? Okay, this one. What do you call this one? This part. So is it the petal? Petal. Letter B, sepal. Letter B, sepal. Letter C, stamen. Letter C, stamen. And letter D, we have the pistil. Letter D, we have the pistil. Again, the question is, what is the male reproductive part of a flower? Letter A, petal. B, sepal. Letter C, stamen. Letter D, pistil. So what do you call this one? These two. Okay, now let's move on to number 8. Okay, you now write your answer on your notebook. 8. Which of the following is the function of the flower in reproduction? Why is it plants have flowers? Which of the following do you think is the function of the flower in the production or reproduction of a plant? Is it make pollen grains? Make pollen grains. B, to protect the seeds. To protect the seeds. Letter C, to attract pollinators. To attract pollinators. Letter D, to protect the flower bud. To protect the flower bud. So what do you think is the function of a flower in reproduction? If you know this one, the color of this, the yellow one, then you can answer this question. You may now write your answer. And let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is, what is the name of the female reproductive organ in the flower? What is the name of female reproductive organ in the flower? Is it letter A, filament? A, filament. Letter B, sepal. B, sepal. C, stamen. C, stamen. Letter D, pistil. Letter D, pistil. So what do you call the female reproductive organ of a flowering plant? Okay, this 4-part. It includes this 4-part. So what do you call this 4? What part of a flower is that? This 4 is the female reproductive parts of a flower. So what do you call them? Is it filament? Is it the sepal? Letter C is the stamen. And letter D, the pistil. Let's have the number 10, or the last number. After fertilization, which part of the flower becomes the fruit? After the fertilization, which part of the flower becomes the fruit? Again, which part of a flower becomes the fruit? So letter A, is it the sepal? A, sepal. B, the ovary. B, the ovary. C, the ovule. C, ovule. D, the petal. D, the petal. So which part of a flower becomes the fruit of a plant? Is it the sepal, B, the ovary, or C, the ovule, or letter D, the petal? You may now write your answer on your notebook. That's the end of our unit test for today, and thank you for bearing with me. See you on the next video of our science class. Bye bye.